All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today we're taking a look at Ryan Holiday's Ego is the Enemy.
Oh, yeah, a great one.
And just to give you a sense of, why we're choosing this book, it's gotten some pretty serious praise.
Yeah.
We're talking big names. Brian Koppelman.
Oh, wow.
He's the screenwriter behind, movies like Rounders,
Oh, yeah.
Ocean's 13. And then we've got Robert Greene, who wrote Mastery.
Definitely a book worth taking a deep dive into.
So clearly something's going on here.
Yeah.
I'm excited to jump in.
Yeah.
And, our mission today is to really help our listener understand how ego, maybe in ways that they don't expect, can sabotage their success.
Right.
And what we can do about it.
Definitely. Ego is the enemy is interesting because it takes a concept we think we understand.
Right.
Ego, right? We're always told confidence is key, but Holiday argues that an inflated ego, this real sense of yourself, can actually be the biggest roadblock to reaching your full potential.
So we're going a little deeper than the typical self-help pep talk here.
Absolutely. Holiday is making a case that ego is this master saboteur just lurking in the shadows.
Ooh, I like that.
Whispering to you that you're better than you are. You've got it all figured out. All the accolades should be yours.
Yeah, it's that voice that can make us blind to our own shortcomings, right?
Exactly. Richard Feynman, the famous physicist, said it best. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. Ego distorts our perception, makes us resistant to collaboration, and hinders our growth.
Because we think we already know it all.
Exactly.
It's like we think we're ripe when we're still green.
That's a great analogy.
We still need that time to grow. And, it's tough enough as it is, but what's even more challenging today is that our culture seems to amplify ego, don't you think?
Definitely.
You've got social media, self-promotion. It's like this constant pressure to be on.
Yeah, it's almost like a breeding ground for inflated egos.
It makes it so much harder to stay grounded.
Yeah.
To focus on the work and not, likes and followers.
Right. So how do we combat this? Holiday uses some pretty captivating historical examples, and one that really stood out to me was Civil War General William Tecumseh Sherman.
Ah, okay.
A model of what Holiday calls humble ambition.
Sherman, yeah. This is a brilliant military mind. What makes him so humble?
Okay, so imagine this.
Okay.
Sherman's offered a promotion to a higher command during the Civil War.
Big deal, right?
A really big deal. But instead of seizing this opportunity for power, for recognition, you know what he does?
Right.
He goes to President Lincoln with this unusual request.
Okay.
He'll accept the promotion, but only with a guarantee that he won't have to assume the higher command.
Wow. So he's actively trying to stay in a role where he can just focus on the work.
Yeah.
Not on climbing the ladder.
Yeah.
Not on getting the attention.
Not on those things at all.
Especially in today's world, that's unheard of.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about what Holiday says about talk versus action. Early on in any journey, it's more powerful to just put in the work quietly and let the results speak for themselves, rather than just boasting about your aspirations.
Absolutely.
It's about proving yourself through what you do, not through what you say. But how do we balance that?
Yeah.
That drive to achieve things with that humility to stay focused on the work, especially in a world that, like we said, pressures us to self-promote all the time.
It is a delicate balance. But Sherman's story and Holiday's point isn't about lacking ambition.
Right.
Sherman achieved incredible things.
Of course.
It's about recognizing that genuine confidence comes from mastering your craft, not from chasing external validation.
Substance over style.
Exactly.
And it makes me wonder if sometimes our desire for a promotion, are we being driven by ego, or are we being driven by a genuine desire to serve?
That's an insightful question.
It's something we should all consider.
Definitely. And Holiday takes this idea of to be or to do even further with the story of John Boyd.
Oh, I've heard of him.
Have you?
Yeah, the fighter pilot strategist.
Yes.
Kind of a maverick.
That's him. Boyd's story is about choosing a path of impact over recognition.
Okay.
He was this incredibly gifted thinker, the architect of many key military strategies, but he deliberately chose to stay behind the scenes, influencing others rather than seeking the limelight.
That's fascinating. So I can already see the connection to managing ego here.
Yeah.
Choosing to make a difference, even if it means staying out of the spotlight.
Yeah. And there's this powerful moment where Boyd's giving advice to a protege.
Okay.
And he says, Tiger, one day You will come to a fork in the road. If you decide you want to do something to make a difference, then you're going to have to pay a price.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he's saying, like, what are you really willing to sacrifice to make a real impact?
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be easy.
And that highlights this importance of making those tough choices,
Hmm.
being willing to forego personal glory for a higher purpose. Boyd understood that true fulfillment comes from the work itself, from knowing you're making a real difference in the world.
So it's not just about what you achieve, but it's about how you achieve it and why. Are we more focused on receiving credit or on making a difference?
That's a great question.
That leads us perfectly to the next key concept Holiday explores.
Hmm.
The power of cultivating a student mindset to combat ego.
Hmm.
Okay? Always be learning, stay curious.
Yeah.
Sounds simple enough. How does that tie into keeping our ego in check?
Well, one of the most potent antidotes to ego is the recognition that we always have more to learn.
Okay.
It's about nurturing humility, acknowledging that we don't have all the answers, and staying open to new ideas and perspectives.
So being open to being wrong. I mean, I know I struggle with that sometimes.
It can be tough.
It could be tough.
To illustrate this, Holiday uses, you might find it surprising, the example of Genghis Khan.
Wait, Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan, most people think of him as this ruthless conqueror, But Holiday challenges that.
So what does Genghis Khan have to do with keeping our ego in check?
Okay, so Holiday highlights Khan's incredible commitment to learning from every culture that he encountered. Khan understood that a willingness to adapt and learn from others is crucial for long-term success. He didn't let his ego prevent him from recognizing the value in other cultures, even those he had conquered.
Wow.
He was constantly absorbing new ideas, new technologies, new strategies.
Okay.
And that's a big part of what made him such a successful leader.
So constantly being in that learner mindset,
Yes,
even or maybe especially when you're at the top. I mean, I'm starting to understand how powerful that can be.
it is. And that mindset, it's more relevant than ever today.
Oh,
The world's changing, it's evolving, so we need to be lifelong learners. We
Right.
need to challenge our own assumptions.
That reminds me of that MMA champion, Frank Shamrock.
Yeah.
He had this plus minus equal training philosophy.
Well, interesting.
He believed to be truly great, you need to surround yourself with people who could teach you. That was the plus.
Okay.
Challenge you,
Yeah.
minus.
Yeah,
And learn from you, equal.
I like that.
Yeah.
What a fantastic example.
Creating a learning environment where you're constantly being pushed and challenged, but also giving back
Yeah,
and helping others grow. It's beautiful.
it's a cycle.
Keeps that ego in check.
Yeah.
So we've touched on the dangers of ego, the importance of humble ambition,
Right.
the choice between, being and doing,
Right.
and the power of maintaining that student mindset.
Mhm.
I mean, that's a lot.
It is. And there's still so much more to explore.
Okay.
But in the next part of our deep dive, we'll delve into how to handle those moments when our ego is screaming at us,
Okay.
to lash out, to blame others, or just to give up. It's about mastering our emotions, particularly when things get tough.
Oh, no, that's what I call a cliffhanger.
Right?
Can't wait to see what other wisdom Holiday has in store for us.
Me too.
All right, so in part one of our deep dive into ego is the enemy, we covered a lot.
We did.
The dangers of ego, the difference between, genuine ambition and ego-driven ambition, and the power of having that student mindset.
Right.
But what happens when we're faced with situations that really test our ability to keep our ego in check?
That's a great question. And it's something Holiday addresses head on. He doesn't just focus on the intellectual side of managing ego. He also delves into those emotional and psychological challenges,
Okay.
particularly how to handle those moments when restraint and discipline are absolutely crucial.
So like those moments when our ego is screaming at us to react,
Exactly.
to lash out, to blame others,
Yeah.
to just, totally let our emotions take over.
Yeah. To illustrate this point, he uses the story of Jackie Robinson, the first black player in Major League Baseball.
Oh, wow.
Talk about a high-pressure situation. I mean, Robinson faced intense racism and hostility, both on and off the field, but he had this incredible ability to maintain his composure and focus on the bigger picture.
It's hard to even imagine the kind of pressure he was under.
I know, right?
How did he do it?
Well, Robinson's story is really a testament to the power of restraint.
Okay.
Imagine the strength of character it took to endure the constant taunts, the threats, the blatant discrimination. He understood that his mission was bigger than his own personal feelings.
Mm-hmm.
He was playing for something much greater than himself.
Right?
And he refused to let his ego derail that mission.
It takes incredible discipline to not react
Yeah.
when you're facing like that kind of direct personal attack.
Absolutely. And there's this one anecdote that really highlights Robinson's strength of character.
Yeah?
So, during a game against the Philadelphia Phillies, the manager, Ben Chapman, was relentlessly taunting Robinson with racist slurs.
Oh, gosh.
It's hard to even fathom the restraint it took for Robinson to not react, to not retaliate in that moment.
And you have to wonder, in that situation, would giving in to that anger, that frustration, would it have ultimately helped or hurt his mission?
Right, that's the question. And what's even more remarkable is that a month later, Robinson agreed to pose for this friendly photo with Chapman to help save the man's job.
Wow.
He put the greater good, the integration of baseball, the fight for racial equality above his own personal feelings of anger and resentment.
That's a powerful example of putting principles above ego.
It is.
I mean, it's inspiring, but it's also incredibly challenging to think about applying that kind of thinking in our own lives.
It is. But the key takeaway here is that mastering our emotions, especially in challenging circumstances, is essential for navigating both success and failure without being ruled by our ego.
Right. When we let our emotions dictate our actions,
Yeah.
we're essentially giving our ego the reins.
Exactly. And Holiday connects this idea of restraint to the idea of early pride, using Benjamin Franklin's story as a really powerful example.
Ah, good old Ben Franklin.
Right.
Inventor, writer, statesman.
Yeah.
Seems like he had it all figured out.
Right.
What's his story about?
Well, as accomplished as Franklin was, even he struggled with ego, particularly as a young man.
Okay.
And there's this anecdote where he's chastised by an older friend for being, quote, too proud.
Too proud.
And this becomes a real turning point for him. He realizes that pride can be this slippery slope,
Oh, yeah.
leading to arrogance and complacency.
So early success can actually be a trap.
It can be.
It would be easy to let those early wins inflate your ego, make you think you've arrived, when really you've only just begun.
That's exactly the danger. And remember that Genghis Khan quote we talked about earlier?
Oh, yeah.
If you can't swallow your pride, you can't lead. True leadership, true success, requires humility. Recognizing that we're always learning and growing.
Right.
We can't let early pride blind us to our own weaknesses.
And prevent us from continuing to evolve.
Exactly. It's about having that beginner's mind we were talking about.
Yeah.
Staying open to new ideas and approaching things with curiosity and humility.
Okay. So we've talked about how ego can sabotage us in the pursuit of our goals.
Right.
And how it can kind of derail us when we do achieve success. And how it can even make failure more devastating.
Yeah.
But what about the bigger picture?
Yeah.
What about our values, our purpose, those things that truly matter to us? How do we protect those from the corrosive effects of ego?
That's a great question, and it's something Holiday addresses head on.
Okay.
He emphasizes the importance of defining what truly matters to us and making sure our actions align with those values. It's about living with integrity.
Living in alignment with our values. It's easier said than done.
Oh, for sure.
Where do we even begin?
Well, he uses the contrasting stories of Ulysses S. Grant and William Tecumseh Sherman to kind of illustrate this point.
Okay.
Both were incredibly successful Civil War generals, but their post-war lives took very different paths.
Okay, I'm familiar with Grant,
Yeah.
but remind me about Sherman. Didn't he refuse to run for president?
He did. So Grant, driven by ambition, pursued a career in politics, and of course eventually became president.
Right.
But his presidency was marred by scandals and corruption. He left office with a pretty tarnished reputation. Sherman, on the other hand, resisted the allure of political power, chose to stay true to his values, focus on serving his country in maybe a less visible role.
So it's not just about achieving success, it's about the kind of success you achieve
Yeah.
and what you're willing to sacrifice along the way.
That's a key insight. Grant's story is a reminder that success can be fleeting, and true fulfillment doesn't always come from external validation or accolades.
Right.
It's about living a life that's in alignment with your values and your purpose, regardless of what other people might think or expect of you.
So maybe Grant, he let his ego drive some of his decisions, and Sherman, by stepping back from the spotlight, was actually making a more conscious choice to stay true to himself.
That's a great way to put it. It's easy to get caught up in the pursuit of those external markers of success, but true fulfillment often comes from a much deeper place.
A place of integrity. It makes you think about what compromises we might be making in our own lives, maybe even unconsciously, that might not be serving our highest good.
Exactly. And that leads to another critical question Holiday explores, one we all face at some point.
Okay.
What are we willing to sacrifice for our purpose? What compromises would we absolutely refuse to make?
It's a tough question,
It is?
but it's an important one. It forces us to really examine what we truly stand for.
Exactly. And speaking of tough questions, we can't talk about success and ego without addressing the flip side, failure,
Look, yeah.
right? It's an inevitable part of life, and it can be a real blow to the ego.
I think it's safe to say we've all been there. Failure can be brutal, especially if you're someone who's really driven to succeed.
Absolutely. And Holiday argues that how we respond to failure is really a true test of our character. And he uses the story of Katharine Graham, the publisher of the Washington Post, to illustrate this.
Katharine Graham.
Hmm.
Vaguely rings a bell.
Didn't she take over the Washington Post after her husband passed away?
She did.
Okay.
Graham's story is one of resilience and growth in the face of immense adversity.
Okay.
She took over the Washington Post under incredibly difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
Not only was she grieving the loss of her husband, but she was also stepping into a role in a very male-dominated industry that she had very little experience in.
Wow.
And then, to top it all off, she faced this series of crises.
Like what?
Personal tragedies, financial struggles, union strikes, even threats from the Nixon administration during the Watergate scandal.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. It would have been very understandable if she had just given up.
Oh, absolutely.
But she didn't. And what's really remarkable is that she didn't go into the role with this grand vision or, master plan.
She was just focused on doing the best she could in each moment, navigating each challenge as it arose.
So instead of getting paralyzed by fear or letting her ego dictate her actions, she just kept moving forward, one step at a time.
That's exactly it. And that's a powerful lesson for all of us.
Yeah.
Failure can be devastating, but it also presents this unique opportunity for growth and resilience.
So it's not about avoiding failure at all costs, but learning to see it as a stepping stone, not a roadblock.
Precisely. It's a chance to reevaluate our priorities, to learn from our mistakes, and to come back stronger and wiser. But that requires humility. It requires letting go of the ego's need to be right, to be perfect, to be in control. We have to be willing to embrace the messiness of life and understand that failure is not the opposite of success. It's a necessary part of the journey.
It's about learning to fail gracefully
Yes.
and then get back up and try again, hopefully a little bit wiser each time.
That's a great way to put it. And it reminds me of another powerful example Holiday shares, Malcolm X's incredible story of transformation. He used his time in prison, what could have been dead time, as an opportunity for intense self-education and personal growth.
Malcolm X in prison.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't sound like a very conducive environment for self-improvement.
You would think so, right? But Malcolm X turned what could have been a completely negative experience into a period of incredible growth and learning.
Huh.
He immersed himself in books,
Wow.
studying history, philosophy, religion. He emerged from prison a completely changed man.
It does make you wonder what he might have accomplished had he not been in prison.
It does.
It's a powerful reminder that we always have a choice in how we respond to our circumstances.
We do. And Holiday uses this example to highlight the idea of alive time versus dead time.
Okay.
He argues that even in difficult circumstances, we have the power to choose to use our time productively or let it slip away.
Okay.
Even in prison, Malcolm X chose to make his time count. He chose to learn and grow. He chose a lifetime.
So it's not about our circumstances, but about our mindset and the choices we make within those circumstances.
Exactly.
That's powerful. And it ties into this idea of maintaining our standards, even when things seem unfair
Yeah,
or when we're not getting the recognition we think we deserve.
absolutely. Holiday tells the story of Belisarius, a brilliant Byzantine general,
Okay.
achieved these remarkable victories, but was ultimately betrayed and disgraced by the emperor he served.
Wow. That's rough.
I know, right?
Yeah,
It's hard to imagine staying committed to your duty when you've been treated so poorly.
it is.
But Belisarius' story is a testament to the idea that true fulfillment comes from living up to our own standards, regardless of external validation.
It sounds like he was able to separate his sense of self-worth
Yeah,
from the way he was being treated.
exactly. He could have easily become bitter or resentful, but he remained committed to his duty, even when it meant facing hardship and injustice. He found his satisfaction in doing what he believed was right, not in seeking praise or reward.
So it's about finding that internal validation.
Mm.
That can't be taken away by external circumstances.
You got it. It's about defining our own standards of excellence and finding satisfaction in the work itself, rather than constantly seeking praise or recognition from others.
That's powerful. Makes you realize how much energy we waste seeking that external validation
Right.
when true fulfillment comes from within.
It does. And it brings us back to the idea of love as an antidote to ego. Holiday uses the example of Frederick Douglass,
Okay?
who, despite facing horrific racism and oppression, refused to be defined by those experiences.
Right.
He famously said, "They cannot degrade Frederick Douglass. I am not the one that's being degraded on account of this treatment, but those who are inflicting it upon me."
That's an incredible perspective.
It is.
To be able to see the humanity
Yeah.
in those who are mistreating you, even when they're actively trying to dehumanize you, that takes an immense amount of strength and compassion.
It does. And it's a powerful reminder that our true worth is not determined by how others treat us, but by how we choose to respond to those experiences. Love, in this context, is about rising above hatred and negativity, choosing compassion and understanding over bitterness and resentment.
It's like turning the other cheek, not in a submissive way, but in a way that says, your actions don't define me. I define myself.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that ego is often at the root of those negative emotions. When we let go of the ego's need to be right, to be superior, to be in control, we open ourselves up to a much more expansive and fulfilling way of being in the world.
So by taming our egos, we're not just making ourselves better individuals.
Yeah.
We're also contributing to a more compassionate and understanding world.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it brings us back to Holiday's central argument. Ego is the enemy. It's the enemy of our creativity, our relationships, our growth, and ultimately our fulfillment.
But the good news is, we have a power to tame that enemy.
We do.
We're not at the mercy of our egos.
Absolutely. We have the power to keep our egos in check and to live a life that's guided by something far more powerful and enduring.
So how do we do that? Where do we even begin?
That's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive into Ego is the Enemy. We'll look at some specific strategies for managing ego and for living a life that's more aligned with our values and purpose.
Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into Ego is the Enemy. We've talked about the dangers of ego, the importance of humility and purpose, even choosing what Holiday calls alive time over dead time.
Right. We've covered a lot.
We have.
Yeah.
And in this final part, I'd love to explore some more practical strategies for actually keeping our ego in check and living a life that's more aligned with those values, the things that we really care about.
Absolutely.
So where do we start with that?
Well, one thing Holiday emphasizes is that managing ego is an ongoing practice. It's not a one-time fix, right? It's not like you figure it out and you're done.
Right.
He actually uses this analogy of sweeping the floor. The dust will always return, so we have to be diligent about keeping things clean. Similarly, ego, it's always going to be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for a chance to kind of reassert itself.
So we need to develop those daily habits, those little rituals that help us keep it in check.
Exactly. And one of the most effective ways to do that is to cultivate a sense of gratitude.
Right.
When we focus on what we're grateful for, it shifts our perspective away from ego's obsession with lack and scarcity. It reminds us of all the good things in our lives, all the people who support us, the opportunities we have.
Yeah. It's like that saying, comparison is the thief of joy.
It is.
When we're constantly comparing ourselves to others.
Yeah.
It's like we're feeding our ego and then we just set ourselves up for disappointment.
Exactly. And gratitude is just one tool,
Okay.
Another powerful practice is mindfulness. Taking the time to pause, to breathe, to become aware of our thoughts and feelings without judgment. That can help us create some distance between ourselves and our egos.
So we're not trying to suppress them or deny them,
No.
but just kind of observe them
Yeah.
with a sense of detachment.
Yeah. Yeah, almost like watching clouds drift by.
I like that.
Right. And when we can create that space, that's when we can start to make more conscious choices about how we respond to situations, rather than simply reacting from a place of ego.
It's about that pause.
Yeah.
That moment where we can choose how we respond.
Yeah. And another key practice is to focus on serving others.
Okay.
When we shift our attention away from ourselves and
Mhm.
towards making a positive impact on the world, it naturally deflates the ego.
Okay.
It reminds us that we're part of something larger than ourselves.
It's about contributing to something bigger than ourselves.
Yes.
You're finding meaning and purpose outside of our own narrow self-interests.
Yeah.
It's kind of like we were talking about with John Boyd and his commitment to making a difference.
That's a great connection.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be this grand, heroic act.
Okay.
It can be simple, right? Helping a colleague, volunteering in your community, even just listening to a friend who needs someone to talk to.
Yeah, those small acts of kindness, those
Mhm.
small acts of service, they they really can add up.
They do.
It's like ripples in a pond,
It is.
just kind of spreading outwards and creating that positive impact.
And those ripples has a profound effect on our own sense of well-being, too.
Okay?
When we focus on serving others, we experience a sense of connection, purpose, fulfillment that no amount of ego gratification can match.
It's like we're tapping into something deeper.
It is
Yeah.
something more essential.
Yeah. And those are just a few strategies,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, just a few.
I mean, Holiday, he offers so much more.
He does.
And I hope our listener, will explore those and find the practices that really resonate. It's a journey,
It is.
a journey of self-discovery.
It is. And ultimately, as Holiday so eloquently argues, ego is the enemy of everything that truly matters. It's the enemy of our creativity, our relationships, our growth, and ultimately our fulfillment.
But the good news is we have the power to tame that enemy.
We do.
We're not at its mercy.
Right. When we can tame that enemy, when we can keep our egos in check, we open ourselves up to a world of possibility. We become more compassionate, more resilient, more creative, more connected, and ultimately more fulfilled.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into ego is the enemy, I hope you, listening out there, have gained some valuable insights and strategies for managing your own ego. I know I have.
Me too. It's an ongoing practice. But it's a practice worth engaging in, because when we tame our egos, we free ourselves to live lives that are truly meaningful.
And fulfilling.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep your ego in check.